Hello, everyone. Today we're starting with something that may feel a little too familiar if you've ever been underestimated, cornered, or pushed just a little too far. The room was glass-walled, sleek, sterile, the kind of cold that pretends to be elegant. I could see my own reflection in the shine of the polished conference table. That's how clear everything was in that moment. But what really stood out was the look on Adira's face. That smug little smile. She slid a piece of paper across the table toward me with her manicured hand, her voice as silky and poisonous as antifreeze. "We're restructuring the department budget," she said. "Everyone needs to make sacrifices. We're offering you a 60% reduction in compensation, but we're hoping you'll see the value in remaining part of our family." Family. That word tasted like bleach. I looked at the number on the page. $34,000. Not a typo, not a test. They wanted to slash my $85,000 salary, earned through 7 years of late nights and industrial burns, down to almost survival level. She kept tapping, her French-tipped nail on the signature line. "This takes effect next month. We'll need your decision by Friday." I didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't scream. I nodded, my face a mask of calm. 3 executives sat silently in the corner, watching like a trio of well-fed wolves. Their eyes glinted with quiet triumph. They thought they had me backed into a financial corner, like some worn-out pawn in a game I hadn't even known I was playing. "I understand," I said, my voice like ice over deep water. "I'll review this and get back to you." Walking out of that room felt like moving through invisible smoke. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was focused. "Oh. My name's Verity, by the way. I'm 36. Chemist, single mom, my daughter. Tess is 12 and battling a rare autoimmune condition, the kind that insurance half covers and specialists love to charge double for. Bills arrive every Tuesday, like a clock with claws. Pure Chem, the company I'd poured my life into, knew all of that. They'd sent cheap daisies to the hospital once when Tess nearly went into organ failure. The flowers died in less than a day. So yes, they knew. And that offer, that insult, was calculated. They thought desperation would keep me compliant. But they didn't know what I'd been working on at night, what I'd discovered, what I'd built. Before I go any further with this story, could you do something small for me? Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is over there. I'm always amazed how far these stories travel. And knowing someone out there is listening, that helps more than you know. Also, if you like these stories about corporate warfare from someone who's lived it, maybe consider subscribing, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Now back to the story. The paper Adira gave me might as well have said, "We own you." I could almost hear them whispering behind the frosted glass. "She'll take it. She needs us." But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I'd been waiting for this moment. I drove home that day not in despair, but in a curious sort of silence. A stormless calm. I passed our favorite taco place. Tess and I hadn't eaten there in months. Medical bills had turned date nights into coupon dinners and heating decisions. But soon, maybe soon. "Mom, why are you still awake?" Tess's voice was soft and groggy when she found me at 2 a.m. at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, legal pads, and a glass of lukewarm chamomile. "Just work stuff, honey. Go back to sleep." "Are you worried about money again?" she asked, climbing into my lap even though she was getting too big for it. 12 years old. Already tuned into adult anxiety. That wasn't right. "Everything's going to be fine," I told her. And for the first time in months, I actually believed it, because hidden deep in my employment contract was a clause, one I'd read so many times before I'd memorized it. But now, with the pressure turned up and my freedom on the line, it burned like a flare in the darkness. All inventions, discoveries, and formulations created using company facilities and materials during standard business hours shall be the sole property of Pure Chem Industries. That was it. That was the clause, and I had something they didn't expect: a home lab. Cramped, dusty, sometimes half frozen in winter, but mine. Years ago, I'd started experimenting at home during odd hours. Nights when Tess was asleep, mornings in the garage while she got dressed for school. I'd purchased my own materials, documented every test in dated notebooks, even filmed some of the breakthroughs on an old iPad. What they didn't know, what Adira didn't know when she smirked across that desk, was that the crown jewels of their product line were born on my time, not theirs. Not only could they not cut my salary and expect loyalty, they couldn't even claim the formulations that had made them millions. They thought they had me. But I had a plan. And that plan began with a name: Quinton. Patent attorney. Brilliant. Sharp as solvent. And already in my corner, I'd spent the last 3 months meeting with him in secret. We'd filed provisional patents for my top 3 formulations. One of them, CW40, was a cold water industrial cleaner that cut energy costs by 30%. Pure Chem hadn't even seen it yet. They were too busy trying to trim budgets to notice what was about to happen. This wasn't just going to be about survival. This was going to be about turning their arrogance into my leverage. And, I was just getting started. I spent the next several days at work playing the role they'd cast for me. Quiet, compliant, numbed. I still wore the white lab coat, still nodded in meetings, took notes, ran my scheduled tests. I let them believe they'd won. I even went so far as to stop by Adira's office and ask, gently, almost sheepishly, if I could have a little more time to think about their offer. I mentioned Tess's condition. I spoke softly, eyes lowered. Watching her feign concern while calculating their savings in the back of her mind was almost entertaining. She clasped her hands on her desk and leaned forward. We value your contributions. Verity, we truly do. But business is business. I smiled. Of course. But behind the scenes, the wheels were already spinning. Every lunch break I could spare, I met with Quinton. We finalized paperwork, reviewed every patent claim, polished documentation. He kept reminding me, the stronger the story, the more airtight the protection. And I had a story carved in precision. My lab notebooks were a mosaic of chemical trials and weekend tests. I had time-stamped receipts for chemicals bought out of pocket, USB drives of test footage, grainy but real. The dots connected. Not one of the formulations was born under Pure Chem's roof. They were just copies, my own recreated versions of the things I'd already made alone. With my daughter asleep, upstairs and an electric kettle hissing in the background. And that was the difference. That was the loophole. That Friday, I didn't give them an answer. I gave them silence. And over the weekend, while they likely patted themselves on the back for cutting overhead, I received an offer that changed everything. Zane, the research director at Novachem, Pure Chem's largest competitor, had been reviewing my patent portfolio with interest. We'd met through a whisper network of chemists, women mostly, quiet messages about toxic work environments and places where creativity went to die. Zane had been curious. Now he was ready to talk numbers. I've reviewed your cold water formulation, he said. It's a breakthrough. Frankly, your entire portfolio is impressive, and your situation at Pure Chem, unfortunate. He didn't smile when he said that. Just looked me in the eye, professional and steady. We'd like to offer you the role of Senior Research Director, starting salary of $175,000, full benefits, research budget, and your own team. Your patents would be acknowledged as your intellectual property, and we'd protect them aggressively. I sat still for a moment. The number echoed in my head. It was more than twice what Pure Chem had offered me to stay. 3 times what they'd tried to reduce me to. But more importantly, it was the first offer in years that wasn't tethered to guilt, manipulation, or desperation. I'm interested, I said, but there's something else we need to discuss first. I told him about the licensing plan, About the documents. About what I intended to walk into that glass building and put on their polished table. Zane didn't flinch. "You're clever," he said. "And you're not just taking a stand. You're reshaping the power balance. It wasn't revenge. Not really. Revenge implies chaos. This was strategy." That Tuesday, one day before Pure Chem's deadline, I got dressed with purpose. I chose a dark green dress, the color of pine needles and stormy intentions. I smoothed my hair back into a tight, clean bun, wore the pearl earrings my father had given me before he passed. A small touch of armor. "You look pretty, Mom," Tess said as I dropped her off at school. "Like you're ready to fight somebody. Smart kid." At 9:30 sharp, I walked into Pure Chem's headquarters. The receptionist barely looked up. I'd passed her for years with a smile. This time, I didn't bother. I took the elevator to the executive floor, where the lights were always just a little too bright, and the silence always a little too sharp. "Adira's," assistant tried to block me. "She's in a meeting." "I know," I said, brushing past her. The conference room door swung open under my hand. Adira sat at the head of the table, surrounded by 8 executives. Power ties and pinstripes. "The inner circle." "Verity," she snapped. "We're in the middle of something." "This will only take a minute," I replied. I walked straight to her chair and placed a thick envelope on the table. "What's this?" she asked, not bothering to hide her irritation. "Not my acceptance," I said. "A licensing agreement." Her perfectly contoured eyebrows furrowed. "A what?" "A licensing agreement," I repeated, "for the continued use of my proprietary formulations, specifically XR7, PT19, and CW40. The room went silent. Decker, the legal director, let out a short laugh. "Those belong to Pure Chem. Your contract clearly covers only inventions created using company facilities and materials during standard business hours," I finished for him. "I have extensive documentation proving that these formulations were developed in my home lab, with my own supplies, on my own time." I pulled out a second envelope. "These are copies of my provisional patent filings. Approved and filed. Adira." Paled as she scanned the licensing agreement. Her face, once smug, now looked ghostly. "The terms are simple," I said. "You may continue using my formulations for a monthly fee of $4,250 per formula. That's $12,750 per month, which, interestingly, is the same amount you plan to cut from my salary." "This is absurd," she said, her voice high and thin. "You can't just—" "I can. And I have." Panic rippled across the table like a shockwave. "You can license them or reformulate everything from scratch," I continued. "But I estimate that would cost millions in R&D and client disruption." Decker opened his mouth. I cut him off again. "And just so we're clear, discovery in a court case would include internal communications. Emails about pushing me out, discussions about Tessa's medical situation. I'm sure those won't look great in front of a judge." That was a bluff, but judging by the way their faces froze, those emails existed. "Everyone out," Adira ordered, suddenly, voice shaking. "Except Verity." The room cleared. Silence stretched. She stood slowly. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I do," I said. "I protected what's mine." Adira's eyes narrowed into slits, the false civility melting off her face like wax under a flame. The cornered, polished executive was gone. What remained was something raw and angry. "We made you," she hissed. "We gave you opportunities. No one else would." I laughed softly. Not cruelly, just tired. "Is that the version you tell yourself at night?" I asked. "I created over $40 million in value for this company. While you paid me less than 1% of that, I worked through holidays, sick days, my daughter's hospital stays. And you used that. You counted on it." She stepped closer, voice lowering like a threat. "This is career suicide. You won't work in this industry again. I'll make sure of it. I slipped a card from my bag and laid it gently on the table beside my Pure Chem ID badge. Novachem disagrees. I accepted their offer yesterday. Director of Research, double my current salary, full lab, full team. And by the way, they're very excited about CW40. You know, the one you haven't even seen yet. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. And here's the fun part, I added, smiling now. My new contract specifically acknowledges my patents and includes an aggressive legal defense clause in case anyone tries to challenge them. Adira's hands curled into fists. You have until Friday to decide on the licensing agreement, I said, straightening. After that, the rate goes up. Before she could say anything else, I walked out. And just like that, the spell was broken. The illusion that I needed them more than they needed me shattered. Outside, the sky looked clearer. My shoes clicked like war drums down the hallway. I was done shrinking, done tiptoeing, done begging for scraps. That same afternoon, I called Tess's school and told them I'd be picking her up early. When she saw me standing there, her backpack already slung over one shoulder, she blinked in surprise. Why aren't you at work? She asked. I smiled and tucked a stray curl behind her ear. I got a new job, a better one. Her eyes lit up. Does that mean we can get a dog now? I actually laughed, the kind of laugh that felt like exhaling after years underwater. You know what? I think it does. 2 days later, PureChem's legal team reached out. They'd reviewed the documentation. Their response? A signed acceptance of my licensing terms. 3 formulas, $12,750 a month. Effective immediately. 1 week later, Adira was removed from her position as division director. Apparently, the board didn't take kindly to the internal chaos or the mounting evidence of unethical behavior. Rumor had it she left the building in tears. I didn't celebrate. Not exactly. But I did sleep better. Tess started her new treatment the following week. It was a biologic therapy our old insurance wouldn't even consider. But with Novachem's coverage and my new salary, the copay was manageable. No more crowdfunding, no more stress-drenched nights calculating what bills could wait another month. Novachem didn't just offer me a job, they gave me space. On my first day, Zane didn't call me into his office. He met me in the lobby. Simple, right? But it spoke volumes. He introduced me to my new team personally. 4 people. Petra, Marisol, David, and Felix. All researchers with specialties that complemented mine. All hired for their brains, not their politics. We've set up your lab according to your specs, Zane said, showing me around. And these are the people who'll be working with you, not under you. Collaboration, not hierarchy. Petra, a sharp-eyed molecular architect, grinned. I've been reviewing your cold water formula. The stabilization work is brilliant. I have a few enhancement ideas if you're open. Open? I'd never been more open. No more hiding in basement labs. No more being the supporting role to someone else's shine. This was different. This was real. That night, after picking up Tess from my neighbors, I must have still looked dazed. She watched me as we got into the car. You look different, she said. Different how? She tilted her head. Like that time we went to the ocean and you kicked off your shoes and ran into the waves. That kind of different. I smiled, my heart catching. We stopped at the local animal shelter that same evening, and that's where we met Birdie. A one-eared shepherd mix with the saddest amber eyes I'd ever seen. She leaned against Tess like they'd known each other for years. We're goners, I whispered. Is this really happening? Tess asked as we signed the adoption paperwork. It's really happening, I confirmed. Birdie curled at the foot of her bed that night, twitching softly in her sleep. I stood in the doorway watching them both. Tess breathing easier than she had in months, and the dog, finally at peace. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Quentin. Board investigation expanding. Rumors of financial review. You started an avalanche. Stared at the screen. I hadn't meant to start a revolution. I just wanted what was mine. But sometimes, the first tremor shakes more than just one foundation. And in Pure Chem's case, that foundation was already cracked. When I stepped into the lab the next morning, everything should have felt perfect. The team was already running small trials. Birdie had spent the night snoring in Tess's bed. We were finally breathing again, financially and emotionally. And yet, there was something gnawing at me, a shadow in the corner of my mind. It arrived that afternoon. An unfamiliar number rang my work phone. I almost ignored it, but some instinct told me to answer. Is this Verity Harlow? A woman's voice asked. Yes. Who's calling? My name is Amara. I'm a junior chemist at Pure Chem. My spine straightened. Don't worry, she added quickly. I'm not calling for them. I got your number through Lena in HR. She said I could trust you. I moved into a private conference room and shut the door. What's going on? They're trying to recreate your formulations, she said. Decker's pushing the lab to reverse engineer XR7 and PT19 so they don't have to keep paying. You? Of course they were. He said, quote, we just need to change it enough to get around the legal details. Imara paused. I mentioned it might violate your patents. He laughed. The simmering in my chest turned to a low boil. Why are you telling me this? She hesitated. Because it's wrong. And because I heard how they treated you. What they did when your daughter was in the hospital. My sister has lupus. I know those bills. I know how they prey on vulnerability. We hung up shortly after, but her words stuck. I called Quentin immediately. Can they do that? I asked. Technically? Maybe, he said. Patent protection is strong, but not impenetrable. If they tweak the formulas enough, they might claim it's a separate product. What about the licensing agreement? It covers your specific formulas, he explained. Not anything they might create later, even if it's clearly inspired by your work. I stared at the wall for a long moment. So they're going to build knockoffs. They'll try, he said. It's standard playbook. I didn't eat dinner that night. Tess pushed her plate toward Birdie under the table, clearly watching me. Is work okay? She asked casually. Just a puzzle I'm trying to solve, I said. Like a science puzzle or a people puzzle? Both, I said. After she went to bed, I spread my personal research notebooks across the kitchen table. Not the polished versions I'd submitted to Pure Chem. Not the ones my old managers had reviewed and nodded over. No, these were the messy, ink-stained journals, the ones I'd written in while waiting outside ER doors, the ones where my ideas lived before they were molded into formulas. And in those pages, I saw it, what they wouldn't be able to copy. Not just the chemicals, not just the process, the system. See, I'd never created these as isolated solutions. I'd approached them like organs in a body, interconnected, reliant on one another. Pure Chem had only ever seen the final version of each product, not the underlying philosophy tying them together. The next morning, I called a meeting with Zane and Novachem's legal team. They're trying to sidestep the patents, I said. Reverse engineering. Zane didn't look surprised. Of course they are. What's your move? I want to build a wall they can't climb. Not just standalone products. A system. The room went quiet. A system? Zane asked slowly. Yes. An integrated cleaning system. One that uses all 3 patented formulations, plus 2 new ones we're developing, each optimized to work together, each dependent on the next. A structure so cohesive they can't just chip away at one part without losing the whole. The legal director leaned forward. You're talking about a moat. Exactly. If Pure Chem wanted to play games, I'd give them a game they couldn't even enter. Zane nodded, a smile forming. How long would you need? 3 months. If I have full access to my team, full resources, you'll have them, he said. Whatever you need. For the next 12 weeks, I lived inside a blueprint of ideas. My office became a bunker of whiteboards and caffeine. My team, Petra, Marisol, David, Felix, and soon, a few new hires, worked like mad scientists with purpose. We weren't just making a better cleaning product, we were building something no one else had imagined, a sequence, a language of chemicals. While I orchestrated molecules, Tess blossomed. The new treatment was working. Her appetite came back. Her skin had color again. She started staying after school for science club, came home with stories about enzymes and explosions. Mom, she said one evening while coloring at the table, do you like your job more now? I put down my pen. Yes, I said. I really do. Because you're not tired all the time anymore, or sad tired, you know? I nodded. She wasn't wrong. Before, I'd been walking around half alive, siphoned by a company that had never truly seen me. Now, I was awake. Restored. 2 days later, Tess came home with a black eye. I gasped. Tess, what happened? Caden said Lizzie couldn't be on our science project because girls aren't good at chemistry, she said. I told him that was stupid, because my mom is a chemist, and you're brilliant. My throat tightened. And then? He said I was lying, that you probably just mix stuff men invented. So I punched him. I blinked. Tess. I know it was wrong, she admitted. But sometimes, the scary thing is the right thing. My words echoed back. I kissed her forehead and pressed an ice pack to her eye. Fierce pride burned under my ribs. By the time the integrated system was ready for testing, it wasn't just a product, it was a movement. 3 manufacturing sites volunteered as test locations. One of them, a former PureChem client, had dropped them after a decade-long contract. The results? Better than even I expected. Cleaning time reduced by 40%, water usage down 60%. Surfaces lasted longer. Safety compliance up. Cost down. Client feedback bordered on worshipful. Zane called me into his office a week later. This is more than a win, he said, setting a document in front of me. This is a landslide. He slid a check across the table. An innovation bonus. Based on projected earnings from the system, the number made me blink. It was the kind of number Adira used to wear around her neck. Thank you, I said, trying not to shake. No, Zane said. Thank you. We reward innovation here. That weekend, Imara called again. They're panicking, she said. Word's gotten out about Novachem's new system. 3 clients have already scheduled meetings. 2 froze their PureChem contracts. I didn't say anything. Adira's gone. Full investigation turned up. Stuff. Big stuff. Financial. Decker's interim now. But morale's bottomed out. We've lost 6 researchers. I sat with that for a moment. Why are you still there? I asked gently. Another pause. My sister's treatments. I still need the paycheck. I understood. More than she knew. Send me your resume, I said. Imara joined my team at Novachem 2 weeks later. Her focus was polymer chemistry, and she was good. Quick, thorough, curious in the best possible way. But it wasn't just her skills that impressed me. It was the way she looked when she walked. Into the lab on her first day, alert but guarded, like someone bracing for another blow. I recognized it instantly. That's how I'd walked into PureChem for years. We gave her a corner station, a fresh coat, and access to everything she needed. No whispers, no proving herself twice over. Just trust, extended like a hand. This still feels surreal, she admitted to me on a Tuesday, eyes scanning the whiteboard we'd filled with system data. I keep waiting for someone to take it all back. They won't, I said. Not here. I meant it. What we'd built with the integrated cleaning system, nicknamed Cascade by Petra, wasn't just a win for the business. It was a win for us. Every scientist who'd been silenced, underpaid, or shoved behind a glass ceiling. Cascade was more than 5 formulas. It was a philosophy. A way to clean industrial spaces with minimal harm to the environment and maximum efficiency. And no one else had anything like it. That's why Pure Chem came crawling. 3 months after our launch, I was called into Zane's office again. This time, he didn't look triumphant. He looked amused. "They want to talk," he said. "Who?" "Pure Chem, Weston and Javier, board members." Of course it wasn't Decker, or anyone from the executive team still trying to mop up the wreckage. No, this was top level. The men who'd once nodded silently in Adira's boardroom, sipping mineral water while she tore me down with a smile. "Do I have to meet with them?" I asked. "No," Zane said, "but I thought you might want to." I did. The meeting was set for the following Thursday. Novachem's glass conference room had a better view than Pure Chem's, less sterile, more warmth, natural light, human things. When Weston and Javier arrived, their suits were impeccable, but their energy had shifted. Not cold, not superior. Just cautious? "You've been busy," Weston said, taking a seat across from me. I kept my expression neutral. "Just doing my job." "An impressive job," Javier added. "Your cleaning system, Cascade, it's reshaping the market." I waited. Let them circle the drain before they asked the question they were here to ask. "We'd like to discuss an acquisition," Weston said. There it was. Zane leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Novachem acquiring Pure Chem?" "Yes," Javier said. "We're open to maintaining it as a separate brand, different market segment, but we recognize the need for new leadership and innovation." They didn't say it directly, but I could read between the lines. They wanted to survive, and I was holding the lifeline. Over the next several weeks, negotiations stretched on. Legal teams tangled over clauses. Financial advisors pulled valuation, data like rabbits from hats. But one thing never changed. I was included in every conversation, every strategic session, every decision. No one asked me to wait outside the room. Eventually, a deal was reached. Novachem would acquire Pure Chem, but keep it operational as a distinct division, which meant someone needed to oversee research and development on both sides. Zane didn't even blink when he said it. "That someone is you. Director of R&D for Novachem and Pure Chem, triple my original salary, full creative control." When I told Tess that night, she high-fived me so hard my palm stung. "Does this mean we can get Bertie a friend?" she asked immediately, beaming. I laughed. "Let's see how Bertie feels about that first." My first day back at Pure Chem, now technically Novachem Industrial on paper, was the strangest day of my life. I wore navy blue, clean lines, not too flashy, not too soft. I walked through the front doors, not as an employee, but as leadership. The receptionist, who used to ignore me, looked up this time and offered a nervous smile. I nodded once and moved on. The executive floor was quiet. Most of the old guard was gone. The few who remained avoided eye contact. That was fine. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to rebuild. The lab team gathered in the main conference room. Familiar faces, people I'd worked beside. Some had been kind, some had been complicit. Others, like Imara once was, had simply been stuck. "I know this has been a time of uncertainty," I said, standing at the head of the table. "And I know not everyone in this room had a say in the way things were done before. Some of you were hurt, some of you were silent, some of you didn't know how bad it was until it happened to you. No one looked away. This division is going to change. Effective immediately. Innovation will be credited properly. contributions will be documented and rewarded, compensation will reflect value, and most importantly, this will be a place where people want to work, not a place they feel trapped. I paused. If that doesn't interest you, you're free to walk away. No hard feelings. But if it does interest you, then welcome. Let's build something better. After the meeting, several researchers came up to speak with me in hushed voices. Some apologized. Others told stories I already knew. There were more victims of that toxic culture than I'd imagined. People whose patents had been taken. Ideas stolen. Promotions dangled and then yanked. The corruption ran deeper than Adira's cruelty. The rot had become systemic, but we could clean it out. Slowly. With purpose. That night, Zane called to check in. "How'd it feel?" he asked. "Strange," I said. "Like opening a door to a house I used to live in, only now I own it. And it's half burnt down," he chuckled. "You'll rebuild it." I already had a list of initiatives. Mentorship programs, quarterly innovation bonuses, anonymous ethics reporting. I wasn't interested in being the face of change. I wanted to be the scaffolding, the structure underneath. And I'd start with one promise. No one else would be pushed out for being too smart, too dedicated, or too inconvenient. Not on my watch. A year ago, I was reading a piece of paper that told me I wasn't worth more than $34,000. Now, I was sitting behind a desk on the executive floor, looking out over the skyline, framed by the same glass that once boxed me in. On my desk sat two things. A photo of Tess, with Birdie and our new rescue, Junebug, and a small plaque my Novachem team had surprised me with during a quiet Friday celebration. Engraved on it were 6 words. "The quietest revolutions are the loudest." I touched it sometimes when I needed reminding. Revolution didn't have to be explosive. It didn't need fists on tables or raised voices. Mine had started in silence, in patience, in planning. That's what made it unstoppable. The Cascade system had gone full-scale global by that spring. Factories in Germany, Singapore, Brazil, all running with our formulations. Clients raved about the reduction in operational costs. One even wrote us a poem. A bad one, but still, a poem. Every week brought new license requests, new partnerships, new possibilities. And with it, new threats. Copycats began to appear. Other companies were rushing to create integrated cleaning solutions. Most of them failed. One came dangerously close. They used similar language in their marketing: clean loops, compound harmony, sequential surfactants. But their formulas were sloppy, unstable, and most importantly, traceable. Novachem's legal team shut them down in 2 weeks. We weren't just ahead, we were out of sight. Still, I didn't get comfortable. Comfort, I'd learned, was dangerous. It made you overlook the crack beneath your feet. That's why I started the scholarship program. It began as a late-night idea while Tess and Junebug were asleep and Birdie was snoring like an old truck. I was thinking about Amara, about myself, about how many brilliant scientists I'd known who'd walked away from their careers not because they lacked talent, but because life had other plans. Caregiving, illness, burnout, grief. So I proposed a new initiative, the Second Spark Fund, a research scholarship for scientists with caregiving responsibilities, designed to provide stipends, flexible schedules, and lab access for people like me, like Amara, like the version of me who once cried in a hospital stairwell, trying to decide whether to buy Tess's medication or pay the electric bill. Zane. Loved the idea. The board approved it unanimously, and the emails started coming in, quiet thank yous from people I'd never met. One researcher wrote, "I thought I had to choose between being a good daughter and a good scientist. You showed me I don't. That meant more than any bonus." Meanwhile, Pure Chem, or what was left of it, stabilized under new leadership. The rebrand helped. The culture shift was slower, but real. I visited the labs weekly, not to loom, but to listen. I'd sit with junior chemists during lunch, ask about their projects, give feedback without red tape. One day, a woman named Tara pulled me aside. "I was here when it happened," she said softly. "The cuts, the emails, the whispered meetings. I saw you walking through it and I thought, she's done. She won't make it." I raised an eyebrow. She smiled. "I've never been so happy to be wrong." We shook hands. That handshake stayed with me. That spring, Tess won first place in her school's science fair. Her project? A homemade filtration system for runoff water, inspired by the Cascade system. When I asked her if she'd like me to help with the write-up, she waved me off. "I got it," she said. "Besides, I already know how you think." Fair enough. After the fair, we got ice cream and let Junebug lick our cones until Birdie barked in jealous protest. It felt normal, and normal for us was revolutionary. But revolution never rests. One evening, I received a confidential report from the legal department. PureChem's former VP of operations, someone I hadn't thought of in months, had been implicated in a kickback scheme tied to old contracts. The house of cards was still falling. I didn't feel joy reading it. Just clarity. The system I had once believed was solid had always been hollow. My departure hadn't cracked it. It had revealed it. Zane and I met that week over coffee. "You're not going to like what I'm about to ask," he said. I took a sip and braced myself. "How do you feel about speaking at the upcoming Industrial Innovation Summit?" I snorted. "Like I'd rather walk barefoot through a chemical spill." He laughed. "They want to hear the Cascade story. Not the scandal, just the science. The philosophy behind it." I mulled over. Crowds weren't my thing. Spotlights weren't my goal. But voices like mine didn't often get platforms. And maybe that needed to change. "I'll think about it," I said. "But only if they let me bring Birdie." He didn't even blink. "I'll get her a badge." When I got home that night, Tess was waiting on the porch with a thick stack of papers. "Can you proofread my essay?" she asked. "It's about courage." I raised an eyebrow. "And you want me to check it for errors?" She grinned. "Well, you kind of invented the word in our house." I took the pages, curled up on the couch with both dogs at my feet, and began to read. She'd written about standing up to Caden, about defending Lizzie. But the ending caught me off guard. Courage isn't always about being loud. Sometimes it's about being smart enough to wait. Sometimes it's about knowing you're right and choosing to act, even when everyone around you thinks you won't. That's when I realized something simple and true. She hadn't just watched me fight. She'd learned how to do it. Spring faded into summer, and with it came the anniversary of my resignation from PureChem. 1 year since they'd tried to reduce me to a number. 1 year since I walked out with a paper in my hand and a plan in my back pocket. It felt like a lifetime ago. But it wasn't just my life that had changed. The industry had shifted. Cascade became not just a system, but a standard. Our competitors scrambled to keep up, releasing rushed products with fancy names and unstable formulas. We stayed steady, focused, quiet. That's what power looks like, controlled, not flashy. In July, NovaChem's board approved the expansion of my scholarship initiative. We added 2 more categories, one for displaced researchers and one for post-parental caregivers returning to work after extended absences. The emails that came in this time were longer. Stories of mothers who'd left labs to raise disabled kids, sons who'd stepped back from PhDs to care for aging parents. They weren't asking for pity, they just wanted a path back. We gave them one. Imara spearheaded the onboarding process. Every week she sent me updates, little bios, highlighted credentials, bold-faced goals. One applicant wrote, "I thought science had moved on without me." Turns out, it was waiting for me to return. Sometimes I'd just sit in my office and let that sentence echo. On a Wednesday in August, I got a call from Zane. Ready for a curveball? I blinked at my screen. Hit me. We've been approached by a foundation, quiet but well-funded. They want to invest in a research institute, with you at the helm. I sat back. Like a lab? More than a lab. A think tank. A place for chemical innovation untethered from commercial deadlines. You'd recruit, lead, set the vision. Fully independent. And what's the catch? Zane chuckled. There isn't one. They saw your talk at the summit. And the Cascade model. They want to see what you do when no one's boxing you in. I didn't say yes. Not yet. But I didn't say no either. That night, I brought it up over dinner. Tess was eating macaroni shaped like little microscopes. Imara's birthday gift, believe it or not. So, I said casually, if I started a school lab thing, but for grown-ups in a different city, how would you feel about that? Tess didn't even pause. Can Birdie and Junebug come? Yes. Will I still have my own room? Yes. Will there be weird science people with snacks? Probably. She gave me a full-body shrug. Sounds fine, just don't pick a boring city. We laughed, and something clicked. It wasn't about running away from Pure Chem anymore. It was about running toward something I could build. The next morning, I walked through the Nova Chem Industrial Lab for what might have been the last time in my current role. I stopped at Felix's station, watched Petra run a color stability test, checked Marisol's whiteboard, which was now an explosion of diagrams, puns, and possibly a haiku about ethanol. Imara caught my eye. You good? Yeah, I said with a small smile. Just looking at what we built. She grinned. Feels solid, doesn't it? Very. Later that week, I sent Zane my answer. Yes. We set the plan in motion quietly. I'd transition over the next 3 months, hand-picking my successor, transferring systems, keeping everything stable. The new research institute would open in the spring, location TBD. My team would have the option to follow, or stay and lead in place. No pressure. By fall, I was speaking at universities again, this time not about scandal, but systems. Tess came with me once. Sat in the front row with Birdie in a service vest and Junebug half asleep in her lap. After the talk, a young woman with bright red braids approached me. You probably don't remember me, she said. But I was in the room the day you walked, into the board meeting with that envelope. I blinked. I was interning in operations. I remember your voice. How calm you were. I didn't understand it at the time. But now I do. You weren't angry. You were just done letting other people write your story. I swallowed. She handed me a note, said thank you, and disappeared into the crowd. The note read, You showed me what science with spine looks like. 1 year, 1 insult, 1 revolution. It had begun in a quiet conference room, with a smug smile and a paper that said I wasn't worth keeping. And it continued, in a world I had helped reshape. Tess started 8th grade with honors in science. She wrote an essay titled Inheritance, about ideas we pass down that aren't genetic, about courage, stubbornness, and lab safety goggles. Birdie and Junebug were still stealing snacks. Imara was preparing to co-lead the polymer division. Petra was filing her first patent. And I was sketching out the blueprints for a research institute, on a napkin while waiting for takeout. The funny thing about revolutions is, they don't always feel like fire. Sometimes they feel like settling into your skin, like being seen, like finally breathing without bracing. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you. If you're fighting your own quiet battle against disrespect, erasure, exhaustion, I hope this story reminded you that sometimes The quietest revolutions are the most devastating, and sometimes they begin the moment you decide you won't be erased. The story ends here. If you found this video meaningful, please subscribe to the channel to support and follow future stories. Wishing you only the best.